Hello my friends, my name is Mark David Welsh, I'm an author and publisher, and today I'm going to be tackling one of the biggest mysteries in writing and solving it. Although you may not like my solution because it's not revelatory, it's not mystical, it's just common sense. And what is that question? Well, a simple one. Where do you get your ideas from? How do stories get born? So today we're going to chat about story inspiration and ideas. Where did it come from? Now there are some common questions a writer tends to get asked. Non-creative people ask you how many books you sell, which is another way of course of asking you how much money you make. But creative people usually ask you, what kind of things do you write? And if you say fiction, the inevitable follow-up question is almost always, where do you get your ideas from? And that's the question I'm going to be attempting to answer today. And also, hopefully, showing you how you can get that inspiration that you need. Now, firstly, let's be pretty clear about where stories don't come from. Now, some writers seem to believe that there's a whole bunch of ideas floating around up there in the ether somewhere, and somehow there's a moment of magic connection when their mind latches onto one of them, pulls it down and onto the page. I've even heard some writers say that they were channeling the departed spirits of other writers or famous individuals. Well, I say no. In fact, I could go further than that and say a rude word, but I won't. Now, I really wish that was true, because it would be mysterious and it would be awesome and I would love it, but I don't think it is. So, moving on quickly. Now, another popularly held belief is that writers can get their ideas because they're a little bit crazy. Well, I can't dispute that one completely, but what is crazy anyway? It just means that you have a viewpoint that's different from the majority of people. You see things in a different way. And if that's the case with you, then congratulations, you're halfway to becoming a writer. So where do story ideas come from? Well, it's pretty obvious really, isn't it? The mind. My mind and your mind, either on a conscious level or subconsciously. And where do these thoughts come from? Well, they arise out of your interaction with the world around you. You can be inspired to write a story by anything and everything. Maybe it's something you see happening in your workplace, in the street, in a cafe, on a bus, on holiday. It could be literally anywhere at any time, even on a route that you walk every single day of your life. You could be inspired by someone you meet. A partner, a friend, a stranger, a work colleague, a shop assistant, some guy in the pub. It could be how they look, how they move, how they speak, and often something that they might say. The real life experience that you have is the wellspring of your inspiration. That's where stories come from. Now, another source, of course, is what's going on in the wider world. So you need to keep an eye on the news and the media. Yeah, I know that can be seriously depressing at times. But for example, if you're thinking of writing science fiction or speculative fiction of any kind, then the technology news is a must. I mean, having been around for a few years now and remembering life before the internet, yes, there was such a thing, it's been fascinating to watch how technology has changed human behaviour, human relationships, and generally society on a very fundamental level. So you need to check out what new lines of research people are talking about. Imagine the effects of some of those innovations could have on everyday life and on people. In terms of entertainment media as well, you've got films, TV shows and books. Other stories or characters or fictional worlds can start a chain of thoughts in your own head. Be a selective but aggressive reader and watcher. Target quality works that won't only inspire you, but help you understand the mechanics of good storytelling. To me, that's far more valuable than reading textbooks on how it should be done or watching this video with me talking about it, because instead you're seeing writing at work, in the flesh, so to speak. Now, you might be asking yourself by this point, okay, that's fine, but how do I really make that work for me on an everyday basis? Well, that's simple. You have to learn to think like a writer. And it's not hard. Start with those books that you've read and those films that you've seen recently. What did you like about them? What parts of the story really worked for you and what parts didn't work so well? Why did you think they worked? Get analytical. Your opinions are as valuable as anyone else's after all. So you didn't like that big budget blockbuster that everyone else raved about, so what? I didn't like Dunkirk and everyone was crazy about that. Did that make my opinion invalid? Did I lose any sleep over it? Of course I didn't. But I did take a little time to ask myself why I didn't like it from a storytelling point of view and what I would have done differently. Now, in some ways it was a pointless exercise because I've no intention of ever writing about that subject, but it's still a useful exercise for the writer's muscles inside my head. And who knows, one of those thoughts or reflections which sinks deep into my subconscious might just combine with a lot of the other junk floating around down there and work its way back into my conscious mind as a good, valid story idea. So let's take a quick example of this. My second novel, Kingdom of Ghosts, was very loosely inspired by an episode of an obscure TV show I saw when I was about 12 years of age. Over 30 years before I wrote the book, or even had the idea. I can barely remember the show. I doubt whether it was any good, but just a shadow of it, a hint of its core idea stayed with me all those years. And suddenly, for some inexplicable reason, it popped up into my conscious mind and kicked off thoughts which resulted in an 80,000 word novel. Go figure. So you need to start to think like a writer. And the first step is to be insanely curious about everything and everybody. Ask questions. What's that called? Why did you do that? What did you mean when you said that? How does that work? I mean, it's probably best not to keep questioning the same person over and over again because they'll probably get a bit fed up with you. But you need to be insanely curious. And you also need to be observant. One comment that really resonated for me as a writer was frequently made on an American TV crime show called Castle. You might remember it. When investigating a case, the team were always looking for what they called the odd sock. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for a writer's search for a story. It's the same thing that Sherlock Holmes always looked for actually in one of his cases. The one detail on which the mystery turned, whether it was obviously a very significant one or something terribly mundane. For example, the curious incident of the dog in the night time in Silver Blaze. The curious incident being, of course, that the dog didn't do anything. You have to ferret out those interesting anomalies. Identify what makes them interesting and what makes them unusual, why they exist and what they mean. But importantly, most importantly, of course, is there a story in it? Could it be part of a story or a jumping off point for one? And that's the question you have to have lurking below your conscious thoughts 100% of the time. I've got literally hundreds of scraps of paper with thoughts, reflections and ideas scribbled down, loads of notebooks from just asking that question. Of course, 99% of those thoughts I will never use. Sometimes when I go back to them, they don't even make sense. They don't seem sharp, witty, interesting or insightful. They seem horribly mundane or even completely muddled. Because that's something you do need to do though. You need to jot things down as you think of them. Because I absolutely guarantee that in the hurly-burly of modern life, you'll forget to write those things down later on, even if you mean to. And of course you don't need to carry paper or a notebook or anything like that these days. There are plenty of free apps for your phone that you can use. Even easier. And talking of mobile phones, now I'm not trying to be critical of modern technology here, or sound too much like a complete old fart, but when you're out and about, get your head out of your phone, your device or your tablet. That Instagram post or Facebook comment can wait. Look around, notice things, watch people, think about what you see, file things away for later use. Be a writer. Now, as a last example of what I've been talking about, here's something fairly mundane, which gives you an idea of my thought processes. Yesterday, for example, I watched a 1948 old black and white movie called Mr. Peabody and the Mermaid that starred the wonderful William Powell and Anne Blythe. And thank God they were in it, because the movie had very, very little else going for it. So for what it's worth, here's the plot of the movie. A middle-aged man goes on holiday to an exotic location with his wife. When he's out fishing, he catches a mermaid and he puts her in a large ornamental pool of their holiday home. He tries to tell his wife and everyone else about the mermaid, but nobody believes him. And his wife gets so fed up she goes back home to mother. And that's the first half of the movie, and easily the most interesting part, because after that there is zero plot development and a really damp non-event of a climax in a doctor's office. And that seems to suggest that all middle-aged men need to go and see a psychiatrist. Although that could actually be true, I suppose. Anyway, there are a lot of story problems here. The writers choose to make the mermaid non-verbal. Now that's logical enough. After all, the notion of a mermaid being able to speak perfect English isn't very realistic. But this is a film about a mermaid. It's not really supposed to be gritty and realistic, is it? The audience isn't really expecting that. So the opportunity for any witty, risque banter between the two leads is completely lost. And given Powell's wonderful facility with dialogue, that's a major strength sacrificed. And also, Powell and Blythe share many scenes together, which make them very one-sided because she can't speak. Similarly, she has a tail, so she's not very mobile and can't leave the pool. So that doesn't help with any possible story development. Now, of course, this tale, forgive the pun, was all done much better in the 1984 movie Splash with Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks, mainly because they had Hannah develop legs when she was out of the water and speak English. Of course it's silly and not believable at all, but as I already said, it's a movie about a mermaid. It's not supposed to be realistic. Now, I'm not going to dissect this film any further. I mean, perhaps I should blog about it on my cult movie site, but it hasn't really got a lot about it that was very interesting. But it did give rise to some possible story ideas, and even a dialogue exchange, which could be the start of a story. And I'm going to share them with you. Now, firstly, the actual legends concerning mermaids are very, very different from the accepted mythology that most people are aware of today. Now, in older times, the appearance of a mermaid was really often associated with a calamitous event. Floods, storms, hurricanes, death by drowning. And sometimes they were said to provoke those events. They were bad luck. And occasionally they kidnapped sailors, luring them both with their physical beauty and their ethereal singing. Think that sounds like a siren? Well, in the original Greek mythology, sirens were actually half bird-like creatures. It's only in Christian mythology where they suddenly assumed some of the qualities previously ascribed to mermaids. So you've already got a few things there. There's the real mythology surrounding mermaids, if that's not a contradiction in terms. The mythology surrounding sirens. The blending and appropriation of myths by different faiths. There's a bit of reading you can do right there if the subject appeals to you and if you've a mind to do it. What it gave me was the start of a possible story. It's just a brief dialogue exchange I'll probably never use, but it went into one of my notebooks nevertheless, and I'm going to present it here for you so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. So we've just got a scene with a man talking to a mermaid. The man starts, "I don't think I trust you. You've got a reputation after all." The wide, wonderful blue eyes looked up at me from beneath dark lashes. "But we've never even met before." The man sighed. "I'm not talking about you personally, I'm talking about mermaids in general." She smiled then. "Oh, you mean the sirens. They do have beautiful voices though, don't they?" "No, I mean mermaids. I'm not a sap. I know that most everyone gets the two of you mixed up." Her bottom lip came out a little, and the sun bounced and danced on the scales of her silver tail. She was quite attractive, really. For a fish, anyway. So there you have it. Nothing world-shattering, nothing wildly original. Just a few lines that popped into my head as a result of seeing a movie that I didn't like very much. So to my mind, that's the way inspiration works, and that's the way stories are born. And you can make that work for you so long as you think like a writer. Well, I hope that's been helpful, even if it was a little all over the place. I hope you join me in future videos where I ramble on semi-coherently about the art and craft of writing fiction. And please feel free to agree, disagree and make suggestions in the comments below. And if you would do the like, share and subscribe thing with those little buttons down there, that will be extremely helpful as well. I normally forget to ask, so the fact I did is quite an achievement for me. Now thanks for sticking with me to the end of this video, and I hope you join me again, and please don't be a stranger.